In recent years, technology, research, and innovation in the healthcare system has been making leaps and bounds at an accelerated rate. A ton of that good work is made possible by tremendous organizations that put a human-centric focus to all of their work and hold a passion and vision for the betterment of everyone's lives. The Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation is one of those organizations and works to provide innovative equipment, programs, and technology in order to help patients recover, relearn life skills, and rediscover their full potential after suffering injury or a medical ailment that disrupts their lives. The facility contains 7 specialized areas of treatment, is a fully affiliated teaching and research hospital with 1,600 staff and over 300 volunteers representing 16 specialties and 43 subspecialties. Joining me today to discuss not just the now, but also some of the promising futures that could empower all of us to contribute to our own healthcare research and development, Mark Korthuis, President and CEO. Mark, you became the President and CEO of Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital in October 19th, 2020.
Correct.
The midst of the world being turned upside down on its head, isolation becoming one of the more predominant things of society at the time. We're locked down to our homes. People are scared. People are hoarding. People are kind of just not sure what's going on. You walk into this role of a primarily supportive piece to what the healthcare system is. When people are sick and ill, they're getting sent to you after their treatments to get further treatment to get back to a normal life. How are you doing? How did you cope? I mean, that's a crazy undertaking to do. And it's awesome that you stepped up to do it, but how are you doing? How has that journey been for you?
The journey's been a roller coaster, like everybody's journey's been, I think, through COVID. You know, for me personally, I went through a period from, March of 2020 up until the summer of 21 where, you're teaching your kids homeschooling, you're trying to work a full-time job. We were moving houses, and it was extremely stressful for me during that period of time, but I always took a step back, and even during my darkest days, and I did have some personal dark days, I was always very grateful for everything I had. And I always looked at, if I'm stressed out in my situation, I'm still one of the most lucky people in the world during COVID. And so I never once thought, poor me, or this is a difficult situation. I always thought, my kids are healthy, I have a house, I have a job, and I have a great opportunity when it came to the Glenrose. I was just thinking to myself, well, this is strange because I didn't meet many of the board members until a year into the job, which was very odd, but I was already used to Zoom. What I wasn't used to was how much COVID completely absorbed the healthcare system, which I knew from an outsider, but when you get into the hospital, and I'm the CEO of the foundation, so I'm not on the operational side, but you see how much it impacted the entire healthcare system, not just acute care centers, and how stressful it was for operational leaders and frontline staff. And so I had extreme empathy for them on a level that, I never had to deal with any of that. I never had to deal with watching somebody with COVID die, And so I was thinking to myself, well, the world is completely chaotic and uncertain. The healthcare system is overburdened in a way it's never been before. Nobody really knows exactly where COVID's going. And when I started in October of 21, when I interviewed for the job in the summer, I thought I'd be back in the hospital working in November or December. And then you quickly realize, oh no, there's another wave of this thing. And then you quickly realize, well, maybe I'll start in January of 21. And then it goes on and on and on. And so, throughout it all, it's like, you realize that the only thing that's certain in our lives is that there's going to be uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so for me, my perspective has been, and it's, taken me time to get here, is that to be adaptable and to be malleable to what life is going to bring you, and that same holds true with the Glenrose, is that has to be a foundational construct which you start from. And so that has been my mantra for the hospital foundation, and I think for my staff as well. But the first year was certainly, I want to say, new terrain that I had to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How has now? I mean, you're a really personal guy. You're very passionate, and you're very passionate about charities, healthcare, and the advancement of pretty much the betterment of humankind. We've had some great conversations, on and off camera, about some of these really unique thoughts that you have about the future of where this can all go with healthcare. You chose the Glenrose, you jumped in there feet first. What are some of the really exciting things and great things that you guys are doing over there right now that really, gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, well, I would say, so I was the CEO of the Alberta Mental Health Foundation for 5 years previous to my role at the Glenrose, and I, absolutely loved my time there. The thing about the Glenrose for me that I was always so enamored by was that everybody I talked to that had experienced care there, whether it was a patient or family members, couldn't speak highly enough about the 1,300 staff that work at the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital. And it's the largest tertiary rehab hospital in North America, standalone hospital, right in Edmonton, that nobody really knows about. It's better known around the world than it is known in Edmonton. And the health technologies, the applied health technologies that are deployed there are some of the best in the world.
Yeah.
And again, not really well known to the broader population. And so all those things attract. And the other thing is that as part of the hospital, which is ironic given COVID, that I came there because my dream was like, I'd love to walk you as a donor or a partner through the hospital and show you all of the amazing things that the hospital is doing with respect to patient care and innovations in health technologies. And I didn't get a tour of the hospital myself until like 4 months into the job.
Yeah.
And, it was amazing that it was about a year into the job, and one of our biggest supporters, Signed Chatty, who contributed $1 million to the renovation of the pediatric rehabilitation wing, which is now called the Chatty Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation. It was like 2 months ago where we finally were able to give Sign a tour of the completed space. And it was like probably the third time I've done a tour of the hospital, and the first time with any external partner. And I wasn't part of the fundraising for it. I wasn't there for, all of the renovations and the duration of the renovations, which took a long time to complete. And so there was ups and downs with that process. But I was there for the end product. And I walked through that tour with Sign, and all of the staff from the pediatric rehab wing were there, ready to show him about all of the advancements and technologies that have been embedded there, all the renovations and all the innovations of how the build out was designed for patients in mind. And I had to hold back tears because it was like, it encapsulated everything that I wanted in my role. Yeah. And it also represented the power that, Sign obviously made a contribution, but he helped raise money, and there was a number of people in the community that stepped up to support, that campaign. And so to see how proud he was and how fulfilled he was in a way I've never seen a philanthropic donor just feel before. And then the staff and how happy they were and how meaningful it was. And then the patients and how transformative, just something, on a larger scale isn't that known or noticeable, even in Edmonton, was just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And so that was so inspiring for me. And, as we move forward with the Glenrose and we've gotten some grounding, one of the things through COVID is that there was an interim senior operating officer, so effectively the CEO of the hospital, who was put in place 2 weeks before COVID really hit because the previous SOO retired. And so they said to her, we just need you to fill this for 2 weeks. And she was there for 2 years. And so you can imagine what it would be like if A, you were that person, but B, that's a key partner for us to try to drive forward an agenda from a strategy and planning perspective. Mm-hmm. And so it was September of 2021 where we hired a full-time permanent SOO. And so in terms of getting our feet underneath us, there's been a number of key things that have happened that have enabled that. And one of them has been hiring the SOO. The other has been really getting clear on what we want to do as a foundation and who we want to be from a mission, vision, and values perspective. And technology and innovation is really key to that. It underpins everything we're going to do. And I think everything we want the foundation to support and represent going forward. So, we've launched, we haven't launched a campaign, but we're supporting an initiative around brain-computer interfaces right now at the Glenrose for Pediatric Rehabilitation. And for those that don't know what brain-computer interfaces are, it's, again, if I think about technology, it's like the most incredible concept that you'll ever imagine. And so for children, so kids, if they have severe neurological issues from a stroke or from cerebral palsy, and they have challenges that prevent them from communicating with their loved ones or their friends or whomever, brain-computer interfaces enable them to speak or interact simply by using the thoughts of their mind. And while that seems like a crazy concept, and it is, how it practically works is that you'll set electrodes on a child's brain, and the electrodes are intentionally set in places where your thought patterns generate ideas or thoughts that you want to manifest in the world. And those electrodes are then connected to a computer interface, and then that computer interface is connected to some sort of technology. And so I think a simple idea that people would understand is that, and this is where we're helping support financially and will see progress over time, is power mobility devices, so wheelchairs, right? Right now we're doing research around connecting the electrodes to the computer interface to the power mobility wheelchair, so that using machine learning, which will continue to advance rapidly, we're able to enable the patient to think, I want to drive my power mobility wheelchair forward to go get something to eat. And then their mind...
Neurons fire, it gets interpreted, and
there they go.
Forward.
And so...
That's that's
it gives me chills thinking about it. And so with the pediatric rehabilitation right now, what things that we have been doing is, one of the patients, Liam, one of his dreams was always to play video games with his brother. Like, he could never play video games with his brother. And so with brain-computer interface, and it seems like I don't know if it seems like a simple thing, or a little thing, but you can understand how impactful it would be for somebody who is not able to communicate. You set the electrodes up to the computer interface, the computer interface up to the game, and Liam can play video games with his brother just by using his thoughts.
Mind.
And so he can beat his brother at a video game just by using his mind. And if you were a mom or a dad of a child like that, you can just imagine how transformational that is on an individual level. And for Liam or any patient themselves, you can imagine how meaningful that is for their lives and how empowering that is for them as an individual. And then if you zoom out and think about BCI from a systems level, or the impact that it can have on future applications in the healthcare system more broadly, the potential is infinite.
Yeah. Even just life itself.
And just life itself.
Right.
Yes. And so
applying that to jobs and applying that to other activities.
Yes. So think about a future where Liam becomes an adult and he wants to live independently.
Mm-hmm.
He can turn lights on and off with his mind. He can open a door with his mind.
Yeah.
He can operate a crane with his mind. And that's just where we can imagine right now concepts.
And that's coming faster than we think, I think.
Well, Jeff Booth, who's a tech entrepreneur in Vancouver and author of a book called The Price of Tomorrow, which I highly recommend everybody read. He talks about technology and the notion of exponentiality and how we can't even understand how fast technology is going to advance. And I think people sometimes get underwhelmed by the advancements because they happen slower than you think, but then they happen faster than you think. And so like artificial intelligence or machine learning would probably be a good example of that, where, 10 years ago, people would be like, okay, like artificial intelligence is going to like completely take over our entire civilization. Nobody's gonna have jobs. And then things happen much more incrementally than you think. You go, well, that wasn't true.
Yeah.
But what I don't think we appreciate enough is that, well, it's very slow, but then it's very, very fast. Mm-hmm. And like if you use, the iPhone as an example, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it cost $1,000 to get a phone or whatever it cost. And there was very minimal applications for that phone. Whereas today, the cost is the same or less, but there's about 10,000 more applications you can use.
Yeah.
And so you just think about where we're at now with technology and where we'll be in 12 months, 36 months, 40 months, 60 months. And it's going to, we need to be alive to how revolutionary it's going to be for things like healthcare, for things like the monetary system, for every aspect of our lives. And I think it's important that we do a good job of educating our community on how that's going to impact them.
Well, how they can be involved too.
And they have, yes.
Because they can be involved at such an exponential level as well. And when we look at the multiplying factor, like you talk about Jeff Booth with the tenfold system, I mean, we as people can be that tenfold system when we work together and we do donations and we believe in the technology advancements that are coming out of places like the Glenrose on the human level and how it can touch everything and translate into other areas of not just their lives, but other people's lives. I want to go back just a little bit because you said some really great things, as you begin. I didn't want to stop you there, but having your donor do that tour and see with his own eyes, hear with his own ears what the effect is of his contributions to human life. That is such a underestimated, underappreciated factor that I think more people need to get more involved with. Seeing the lives that he's touched and the advancements, the good work that you guys are doing there through the research, through the services and the programs that you guys are providing over at the Glenrose is awesome. And I would always encourage more donors to get more hands-on in the sense of take those tours, see what your money is doing, because it's huge. Some of the technologies you talked about earlier, I mean, we're going into the neuro tech about controlling and being able to do activities just with your mind is so unbelievable. We see a lot of videos now on social media too of some of the technologies coming out for children who've never heard their entire lives. And all of a sudden they get the neuro implant piece that allows them to hear for the first time. Unbelievable.
It's beautiful.
You guys are touching things like that as well. You guys are doing a lot with prosthetics and things like that. How about some of the other technologies that are really, changing the game? Can you talk to some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things I would just note on the donor side that I think it's important. It's important to me that people understand, because I get sometimes I look at charities and the charitable sector as a whole, and you see the ubiquity in which charities now exist. And, the cynic in me or the cynic might wonder, well, how are we efficiently deploying our resources as a collective? And, that's a question worth pondering. But as it pertains to the Glenrose or any charity you support, for me, it's really important that there's donations, which money is important, obviously. And as a foundation, I would be disingenuous to say that that's not what we do. That said, there's many ways to get involved.
Yeah.
You often talk about time, talent, and treasure. And you can't underestimate the value that your time or your talent can have with respect to, especially now with what we're doing around technology and the adoption of accepting Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. We need a lot of intellectual capital to help us understand this complex society that we're living in and how we're trying to transform it using technology and innovation, because it's very complicated. But just back to the technology piece, one thing with regards to COVID, which was a really interesting development for healthcare systems around the world, is the necessity to transition to virtual care. And virtual care has been something that the healthcare systems have talked about for many, many years. And, it's been something that has been inevitable, but has been slow in terms of innovation or adoption. And there's a lot of reasons for that, some good, some bureaucratic. But COVID forced that on everyone. And so I was just speaking yesterday with the provincial lead for addiction and mental health for Alberta Health Services. And he said that, so they did 200,000 virtual visits this last year. And pre-COVID, the number was 2% of their total visits were virtual. That 200,000 represents 70% of their total visits for mental health care.
Wow.
And so the Glenrose has child and family psychiatric unit. We have a geriatric psychiatric unit. And so we're delivering mental health care as well. And so you think about that, and part of the conversation that's happening with healthcare right now in Alberta is acute, is around costs and drivers of costs. And so just think about how virtual care is enabling a number of things to happen, all positive. One, reducing costs for the healthcare system. Two, enabling care in the community so you don't have to go to the hospital if you don't want to. Three, it's providing a better experience for patients, because one of the things, and I'm really passionate about mental health, and so I'll speak to that just for a second, is that there's a lot of stigma around, you hear about stigma, and we've had stigma reduction campaigns for many, many years, but there's still that, I don't want to go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist in person because A, I don't want to be seen walking into the clinic, B, I don't know how the interaction is going to be with the clinician, and C, am I going to be judged? And all of those unknowns, the virtual element allows you to receive care in the comfort of your own home or whatever environment that is most comfortable to you. You can have the support of a family member or a loved one or whatever, and you don't have to have that transportation to find the clinic. You don't have to park, the stress and anxiety of parking. All of those little things have created a better user experience, a better patient experience, where I think there is this assumption by clinicians that and this is no different from, I'm not going to critique a clinician, it's kind of the workplace mentality. It's like you have to be in person to provide that value. And that notion has been, I think, put to the side. And I think there's lots of evidence to suggest that virtual care, not in all instances, but in many instances, is preferable to the patient.
Yeah.
And I know for me personally, it is. And I can guess that you would prefer that too in many instances, where you could just call your doctor right here and on the video and say, hey, what's this? Is it a problem? Oh, no? Okay, you just saved me 2 hours of my time and probably saved $1,000 in costs.
There's a lot of talk about like remote systems now too, where you can take your heart rate,
Yes.
like you look at Apple Health and things like that. There's a lot of these, there's a company here, Meadow AI, that's been on the show before, talking about these remote systems where they can take, blood sugar levels, they can take heart rate, and they can send that information in all remotely. And Alberta and much of Canada is remote communities. Like they are small little communities, remote. It's a long jaunt in. Even the advancement of lung care has developed hugely. We've had some people that we've been involved with the Lung Association, and just some of the technologies around that on monitoring and getting immediate feedback from a doctor. Workload on doctors comes down as the technology advances as well, which allows them to be more focused. They can actually look at and pay more attention.
Provide better care to the patient.
Banging people out through the waiting room. They can be more acute, more focused.
And one of the things just specific to what we're doing around virtual care is, specific to COVID, obviously there's been a number, tens of thousands of individuals, hundreds of thousands of individuals in Alberta who have suffered from COVID. Many people have died. Many people have had to stay in hospitals for a long time and suffered greatly. And now there's also this growing list of people who are suffering from long COVID symptoms. And so persistent symptoms from COVID that last over 12 weeks. And, I think the number's up to like 70,000 people have had long COVID symptoms, whether that's psychological distress, brain fog, chronic fatigue. And so we've launched a campaign, again, with one of our main donors, Signed Chatty, leading the efforts to raise $500,000 for a virtual COVID rehabilitation program that's being supported by Alberta Health Services Virtual Hospital, but led by a number of folks at the Glenrose. And so effectively what that is going to provide is, it's going to enable some folks that are in hospital with COVID to return to their home. So it's going to reduce the pressure on the acute healthcare system, and hopefully open up beds for other patients that have other needs with regards to things like surgery. It's also going to allow patients to continue to receive care as though they're in the hospital, but at home. And so to your point about home health and home health monitoring, they'll have access to technology with respect to home health monitoring around their, heart rate, blood pressure, and they'll get access to virtual care with physicians or social workers or psychologists or physiotherapists, which can all be done virtually and in their own home. And so we've launched a campaign to raise $500,000 to support that initiative. And, it's a critical initiative at this time because long COVID is a pressing societal concern. But it's also a great use case for future applications around virtual care for rehabilitation. And so that's what I'm most excited about, is obviously supporting patients now, but then allowing the healthcare system the opportunity to say, okay, this worked really, really well. Here's some health economics to tell you why. Here's the patient outcomes to tell you why. And here's the patient and the clinician experience to tell you why. And then that can be then cascaded across a myriad of healthcare programs and services. So
adapted and modified.
So really excited about that. The other thing which blew my mind away when I first started at the Glenrose was, the prosthetic, and we produce and create prosthetics for individuals at the hospital. We have a whole shop for them. The foundation a number of years ago purchased what is, I believe, the only 3D printer for prosthetics in Canada in a public hospital. And so, now you order a prosthetic for your leg or for your arm, and we can build it using a 3D printer. And it's like, I don't. It's mind blowing. And again, this is the nascent stages of 3D printing. So if you think prosthetics now, just think about the applications for more complex parts of our bodies into the future. And so the Glenrose is really this incubator and tech validator for all of these either novel or cutting edge health technologies that need a place to be validated. And because the Glenrose is a hospital where the patients are not so acutely ill that the risk profile of testing these technologies poses a high risk to them from a health perspective, many of them are extremely excited to be able to test these technologies that have never been used before in the world. And, I think our vision for the hospital is really to become this global innovation hub for health technologies. And I think Edmonton and Alberta is really well positioned to capitalize on that. And the Glenrose is going to have a role to play in the health innovation ecosystem. But I think it's important to note, though, that we all have a role to play. And there's a number of different organizations, entities, and even individuals that can get involved in any way, shape, or form. And that includes patients. And so, one of the things that really is exciting, and we can talk about the cryptocurrency piece in a bit, but
I was going straight there. I want to say, well, let's talk about how are some of the ways we can open it up to more. And you're going right into that. Let's chat.
Well, let me just...
Your big announcements.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to bury the lead, but maybe this is the lead. As we were talking about brain-computer interfaces, and, there's a huge push right now around non-fungible tokens and digital art. And so, it's a concept that's kind of hard to grasp for some people, or some people think, well, that's stupid, which are both fair assessments to some degree. I would share a different position, but what we're going to be doing, and this is going to be more formally announced down the road, in addition to accepting cryptocurrencies as a donation, which is, we're the first health foundation in Alberta and maybe Canada to be doing so. And I want to talk about that some more. But
yes,
regarding the brain-computer interface, we are going to be making an NFT, so digital art, with a patient using brain-computer interface. So again, think about this. You connect the electrodes to the brain. The electrodes are connected to the computer interface. The computer interface is connected to, think about a plastic ball that has wireless technology embedded within it. Think about that plastic ball on a white canvas, and there's paint that's right beside it. And so a patient, or you and I, but a patient is going to create art for us using their mind. And then we're going to take that art and we're going to mint it as an NFT, and we're going to have an auction and sell that art. And I think this is going to be the first time, I like to say first time in Canada and first time in the world, as though I've done some deep research on it, but I really haven't. So don't get me in trouble for that. But I think this will be the first time in the world something like this has ever been done. And so, you can talk about NFTs in any way you want, which is fine. But the story for me here is really around, it's a patient that's using their mind to create something that's their own. And then they're going to sell it to then redeploy those funds into the program that's helping that individual. And by extension, that's going to be helping other individuals like him or her.
Yeah.
And then we'll have knock-on effects over time across multiple applications, across multiple healthcare modalities. And that's the patient that did that.
Yep.
That's not the foundation that did that.
Yeah.
That's not the donor that did that. That's not the government that did that. That's a child that has a severe neurological disorder that just changed the world.
That is mind-boggling, because it's you're taking somebody, you're rebuilding a gift that they lost and expressing it and sending it out in a way that nobody else can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then through that, we're going to allow people that are in his or her position to allow others to do it through this technology and this new way of looking at the world and new way of looking at what is accessibility, what is mobility. If we're taking away the limitations. Losing an arm now is not a loss. It can be a gain. It can be a new opening. You know, we see that. I love hearing those stories about those people that I lost my legs in a mine. I don't love hearing that's part of the story.
No,
but
I
the
know where you're
stories
going.
of their, I lost a limb to an IED in a war or in my country. I was a little boy or a little girl walking through a rice field and this happened to me. And now I'm an Olympic athlete with the miracle of these prosthetic limbs, new tools. And now it's not just physical. Now we can take it mental and we can express a mind.
Well,
We're
redefining what human ability means.
yes.
And
The power of the mind is so awesome. I love that spin on this story.
Yes.
Is that's the power of the mind. You know, we talk about that in, like I said, those other examples where someone wills themselves to get into a position where I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to move forward. But this is the mind.
Yes.
Like, it's the mind. Like, this is
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, and there's two things there where we have no idea the power of the mind.
Yeah.
We have no idea the power of technology.
Yeah.
And those two things combined can be one of the most positive combinations for our civilization and society. And I don't want to discount the fact that, you know, a lot of patients at the Glenrose have had, you know, extremely traumatic experiences.
Right.
And the interesting thing, and again, interesting probably isn't the right word, but, you know, it's through those traumatic experiences that many of the patients are some of the most resilient individuals that I would know. And so, you know, as you think about where our society's at today, and this is more of a general notion that I've thought about a lot, is that there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of uncertainty in our society. And, you know, given that we're biologically predisposed to, you know, the fight or flight when it comes to stimuli coming our way, you know, a lot of what's happening now is that we flight or we avoid. And when you're faced with a life-threatening injury or illness, you're forced to confront something that almost killed you.
Yes.
And as a result, you know, I would say that these patients have been able to become much more mentally strong as a result and have a completely different perspective on life as a, you know, not all the time, but as a general statement. And for us in society who are lucky enough to be healthy physically, number one, and then mentally, you know, it's really important that we take a step back and have gratitude for the things we have in life, even though it's such a crazy world. You can only control what you can control. And, you know, sometimes you have to zoom in and have a more myopic view of what's really important in life. And certainly my experiences at the Glenrose and, you know, when I was with the Mental Health Foundation provided me perspective on, you know, what hard is or what challenging is or what an obstacle looks like. And it's the patients that overcome those obstacles that are very, very acute and unfair and unlucky, that give me the most inspiration, and I think should give others inspiration too, to say, you know what, I understand that life is scary. I understand that COVID is scary. I understand that war is scary. I understand that everything going on in society is scary. But we need to confront, not avoid, the challenges that we face in our lives. And as a result of that, even though it may cause short-term distress, it's like working out. You don't build muscle without a tear. And that's a message that I think patients at the Glenrose, to me, epitomize.
Right.
Is that they've had a tear, and it's been a very, very large tear in some instances, life-threatening tears. And they've been able to use technology to strengthen themselves to a point where they can contribute in any way they see fit in society. And that's a really beautiful thing. And the other thing, not to drone on about this, but, rehabilitation for some of these folks means different things.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're trying to enable them to get back to living their fullest lives. And that will mean different things based on different injuries or illnesses. But my hope is that over time that we're able to leverage technology to give them the best chance to live their fullest lives.
Yeah, bang on. Awesome. Mark, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about all the stuff that you guys are doing over there and some of the potential futures, sharing some of the stories. This has been super educational, super fantastic to hear. Glad and congratulations on the position, and I can't wait to see what you do with it. I know you guys have some great things coming up at the pipe in the next year here. Some announcements on some events that you guys are going to be putting together. Some innovative technology that you guys are putting together, and innovative methods for people to get involved with the Glenrose as well. I know that you've got a conversation with Jeff Booth talking about cryptocurrency and the announcement that you guys made with the Glenrose on how you're going to be accepting that from donors. I can't wait to hear more about that. And again, thanks again for coming in. This was fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's a privilege to be here, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you and love what you're doing with Alberta Impact and Kiwi Productions. And yes, I'm privileged. I'm privileged to be here. I'm privileged to be in my role. And thank you.
Absolutely. Awesome.